What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 48 Men Podcast. Today, my guest is Connor Smith. He's a musician from Nashville, Tennessee. He's not a magician. Well, maybe you're a magician, but he's a musician. He's the singer of I Hate Alabama and so many other great songs. And I've got to know him through social media, and we've had a newfound friendship. So I'm super excited for a conversation today. Connor, thanks for joining me, man.
That was a perfect intro because this wild story, but I laugh because there's a classic story where my granddad called me a magician at a restaurant or something, and today's his 78th birthday, and he's sick, so he can't come to the Grand Ole Opry tonight. So either way, I love that you just did that. It was a full circle.
Are you actually a magician though?
I'm not. Sadly, I love the art of it, but I can't do nothing. I got one card trick.
Yeah. Well, I'm not either, man. I've actually been on a David Blaine kick lately. I saw him on Jimmy Fallon. Sadie did not know who David Blaine was. Yeah, you know who David Blaine is, don't you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I was like, I cannot believe you do not know who David Blaine is. But she was completely infatuated with just some of the stuff I was showing her last night that he's done. Well, I kind of just mentioned your song at Alabama, but you really are. I don't know if I would say you're the next big thing in country music, or if you're the new big thing in country music. You've really been everywhere. You just finished tour with Thomas Rhett and with Parker McCollum, and you've really just, you're coming up through the ranks, man. And it's been really cool just to kind of see your journey over the last few months of just seeing your name on the radio, seeing your name. Like you said, this is your second time playing at the Grand Ole Opry tonight. So when this goes live, you will have just played it at it this week. But it's really been cool just to see your name keep popping up everywhere I've been looking.
Yeah, man, it's been a crazy last year and a half. We put out my first song in July of 2021, and this last year's just been crazy and a lot of blessings. And I felt like, there's something to celebrate every month. And I got to live out a lot of dreams, going on that first tour with Thomas Rhett and playing the Grand Ole Opry, having a song on the radio. I Hate Alabama obviously did what it did and continues to grow. And so, we've been really fortunate. I've always just kind of dreamed about writing country songs and telling stories. And so now I get to do it full time, and I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, for those listening who maybe don't really know who you are, can you kind of just explain a little bit about who you are and, where you're from and kind of what you're doing?
Yeah. So, I'm 22. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. And I've lived here my whole life, still live here now. I started writing songs when I was about 6 years old. And, man, it really just felt like the only thing I ever dreamed about was to write country songs. I played baseball growing up and wrote songs, kind of always who I was. And then when I was 16 years old, I signed my first publishing deal. And then when I was 18, I signed a record deal right out of high school. And then waited about 2 or 3 years, put out my first songs last year. And over the last year, I've just been kind of on this crazy ride of, chasing down this dream of being a country artist and writing songs, performing them live, and going out on tour with some dudes I've dreamed of, since I was little. So music-wise, that's kind of the recap, the short recap of kind of my life.
Yeah. Well, I saw recently that I think you were with your dad at the Braves Stadium, and was that a dream of yours growing up, wanting to play professional baseball too?
Yeah, 100%. So my claim to fame is I played in the Little League World Series.
Did you
when
really?
I was 12. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So baseball was as big of a part of my life as music was, growing up. And even when I signed my publishing deal when I was 16, I was stayed in high school and then, stayed starting on the baseball team. So I would get out of school about 11:30, go write songs at 12, get back for the baseball game at 4 for the last 2 years of high school. And so I was really fortunate I got to do all that. But baseball is still a big part of my heart.
Yeah. Was that all you played growing up?
I did a little bit of everything, I played football and tried everything, but baseball was the one that, I spent every summer, traveling and, got as far deep as you can go.
Yeah. How far did y'all make it in the Little League World Series?
So we got 7th in the world, I think. It's a crazy process. You basically go, there's 4 tournaments you got to win to get there. And then, you win the regional and they overnight you on a bus to Williamsport and you're famous for 2 weeks. And you next thing you know, I had a top 10 play on SportsCenter. There's a clip on the internet of me singing on SportsCenter. They did this whole clip, where they talk about me wanting to be a professional songwriter. And then they said, sing me a song I wrote, and I sang them this worship song that I'd written. and it ended up getting played on SportsCenter. And then over the last year, they've played that thing like during every game. So it was pretty crazy.
That's awesome. That's such an interesting claim to fame.
100%. Well, it's fun because it's like, you think about like the songwriting kid growing up, and it's like as big of my heart was for sports and baseball, and so that's kind of one thing I can point to and be like, dang man, that was a cool experience.
Yeah. So even just you kind of sharing, just writing that worship song, has faith been something for you that's always been an important thing, or was there a moment where something really clicked for you, or how have you kind of walked that line?
Yeah, so I think, for me, I was really fortunate to be in a household where, my faith was not only championed, but, I had an example to what it looked like to follow the Lord. And we grew up in a Baptist church. And when I say I started writing songs at 6, I started writing worship songs. I always say that I didn't have the guts to write a song for a girl yet, so I just wrote love songs for Jesus, and so I did that from about 6 to 13. Most songs I wrote were these worship songs, and I play them in church and we play them around town. So I always thought I'd be like a Matthew West, Brandon Heath, like those were the guys that I wanted to be growing up, and so either way, growing up in the church, playing in church a lot. And then I think as you get older, there's a moment where your faith kind of becomes yours, and you kind of got to make decisions. Really after high school for me, where I was like, all right, I grew up in a private Christian school, and I remember leading a Bible study in the 7th grade, and so it was always like a part of who I was. But I think after high school was really the moment where my faith became real, and especially as I got into this career, and you're faced with a lot of decisions on who are you and who you want to be, because if you don't know, they're going to tell you. And so when those kind of rubber hit the road on those things, it was really where I felt the Lord, and I always felt a really strong calling on my heart towards Him. And so He's been really faithful to me.
Yeah. How do you feel like, if you didn't have that encounter, or if hypothetically, if your faith was still your parents' faith, how do you feel like that would shape and impact kind of like what you're doing now? Because even for me, I just think about, I grew up in church. I had, 2 awesome parents, and I had faith, but it wasn't until, I kind of hit rock bottom for myself, where I actually became real for me. And I wasn't no longer just, going to church on Sunday because my parents were driving me there. I had to physically drive myself there because I went off to college, and it became real to me. And I just kind of think about back to when, like, if that moment didn't happen, then I kind of just would have been in this, just kind of in this phase of, I don't know, just confused about who I am and what I was doing. So for you, like when you had that moment and you're still writing songs, you graduate high school, you sign a record deal, and life gets really real for you. How do you feel like, how do you feel like you grew up super young? Because if you didn't go to college, right after high school, you start kind of chasing this dream. How do you feel like your faith has impacted just that journey for you?
I mean, it's everything, right? It's like if the Lord is truly, if you're truly abiding in the Lord, it's going to shape everything in your world. And so for me, it's like, I always felt like, I think everyone kind of lives through a portion where they're kind of half in, half out. And I think for me, I got to a point where I realized that I didn't want to be I don't want to be as close to sin as possible without sinning. But I wanted to be as close to the Lord as I could be. And those are two completely different ideas. And so I think that's something I've always struggled with, You're growing up and trying to figure out who you are, and everybody's trying to tell you. And, I'm in a world where, everything gets put, in front of my face. And it's like, when the enemy tempts Jesus in the desert after fasting, the biggest thing he can give him is the world. He said, I'll give you all the world if you'll just bow down to me. Yeah. And, and once again, I'm in an early phase of this career, but I've seen it enough to know that, that's what I deal with, is that the enemy says, I'll give you the world if you want it. But man, I've always felt like the Lord was so close to my heart, and there was such a weight on my heart from an early age that the Lord says, you're mine, and I'm going to use you, and I'm going to be faithful to you. And, if I walked you through in-depth pieces of my story at every turn, the Lord has just done crazy things to remind me of his goodness. And oftentimes it was when I wasn't even ready for it.
Yeah.
But he knew by the time that I would get, he would call the promise. But by the time I stepped into the promised land, that was when, my heart would be ready to handle something like that.
Yeah.
And so either way, it's a daily battle. It's a daily decision, and, not something I've perfected, but, I think for me, a lot of it has to do with the people I put around me, and kind of just making that decision day in, day out. There's a verse that I just love and I repeat to myself all the time of, do not grow weary in doing good, for in the proper season you'll reap what you have sown. And I think that's a big part of kind of my life, is just choosing daily to be faithful to the Lord, and in that He's been so faithful to me.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, I want to share a little bit kind of about how me and you got connected. So it's kind of funny. This is coming back to baseball. It's my brother had gotten drafted back in, I guess that was July, maybe August. No, I think it was July. So he had gotten drafted, and I had flew home from Washington to his draft party, and all my family was there. Sadie had ended up going home instead of coming with me. She had to get back to our honey, and we were just celebrating him getting drafted and all that stuff. And my mom had just the radio playing, and one of your songs came on, and my cousin, who's just a diehard country music fan, was like, Connor Smith's the next biggest thing in country music. And I was like, I hadn't heard of you at this point, because I don't listen to country music a ton, but I've started to more lately again. And I was like, I didn't know who you were, and he was just telling me about your I Hate Alabama song, Take It Slow, and all these other things, and I was like, that's super cool. And the very next day, you DM'd me. And it was just this really cool moment of it was kind of like a God wink of, because things like that happen every now and then, but something I feel like that was super intentional, of just, me being at that setting with my family, and him saying that, and then talking about you. And then the very next day, seeing you DM me, and just something that you had heard that me and Sadie had done that encouraged you, which is what led you to DM me. So can you kind of just share a little bit about, on your end, how we ended up connecting? Because I think it's a really cool story.
That's so crazy. I'm a big believer there's no such thing as a coincidence.
So Melon sent me this hat that I'm wearing right now, and it's so awesome. It's honestly one of my favorite hats. I grew up on the beach, so I was always on the water, and now we live on the bayou right by the river. So if I'm on the boat and my hat flies off, this thing can float, and I just think it looks good. It's one of my best looking hats that I have, and people ask me about it all the time. So I've honestly been wearing Melon hats for a few years now. My brother was the one that put me on it. He, I guess, saw an Instagram ad somewhere, or just saw an ad for it and got him. He ordered me one, and I loved it. My first one was the camo one, and I just loved it. This is probably my favorite one. It's the Hydro edition, and I love the black camo. It fits my head perfectly. I have a smaller head, and this one fits me perfectly. And I like it a lot more than my typical hats, because honestly, it just feels nicer. And not only do I love wearing this hat when I'm on the boat or when I'm on the water, but I love wearing it when I work out. I've been running a lot more lately, and just with, Louisiana, obviously it's hot. It's getting colder now, but it's been hot lately, and I love wearing this hat when I go running. It's sweat resistant, and I think it just looks super sleek when I'm running, when I'm working out, when I'm in the gym. I was working out earlier today. I had it on backwards doing my squats. And not only is it sweat resistant, but it's also super breathable, and it floats when it's in the water. And they also offer free U.S. standard shipping, free and easy 30-day returns, and a 2-year warranty. So Melon is giving 4-8men podcast listeners an exclusive offer of 20% off your first order. Go to melon.com/Christian and use code Christian for 20% off. If Melon doesn't become your new favorite hat, send it back for a full refund. No questions asked. Again, that's melon.com/Christian and use code Christian for 20% off. Pick one up and let me know what y'all think.
So my side of the story is I was on the road one night after some show, and I could not sleep, and it was super late, and I was just starting to, my now girlfriend, we were just starting to I was pursuing her, in that season, and so it was super late, and I couldn't sleep, and I went to look. And I was just I'm a big, anything I'm doing, I'm trying to soak in wisdom. And so either way, I stumbled across your and Sadie's video talking about, dating and relationships and purity. And so the way I watched it, and man, just so much wisdom in that video and in what you were saying as a man. That's one thing I really respect about you, is just kind of the way you stand up for what true manhood looks like and what it looks like to serve, not only the Lord, but your wife and in a relationship. And so I reached out to you, at like 3 a.m. In a tour bus bunk on DMs, and it led to this.
Well, it was really cool when I saw your name pop up on my thing, because typically I don't get, like, I usually don't read my DMs, but for some reason yours popped up in like my actual DMs instead of like my requested or whatever. So
that's wild.
Even that thing was just, it was really a special thing. And I definitely, I don't believe in coincidences either. I do think that God orchestrates all those little intricacies that end up happening. So really, me and you talked on the phone before this podcast, and really just about the tour life. And, as men, like, we do have temptations that we face. We have, and even what you talked about, the world, and, there's the verse where it says, "Oh Lord, why am I going to botch it right now?"
Hey, I don't know the whole Bible either. You're good, man.
Oh, if you're given the whole world but you forfeit your soul, why am I drunk?
Yeah. I don't want to get to what benefit is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that one. Hey, listen, I only know it because the Toby Mac song.
Hey, you can come run my podcast.
We're switching roles. I'm interviewing you now.
We'll switch roles. Yeah, you can interview me. I literally just drew a blank on that, but it's one of my favorite verses because it's so true. Like, you can gain the whole world, but if you forfeit your soul, then what's the point? And just with tour life and all the stuff that you're doing, what were your expectations before you went out? Because how many cities was it? It was a long tour.
Yeah, I mean, the Thomas Rhett tour that we just did was 40 cities.
Yeah.
But then, of course, before that, we were going full speed before. So
before that happened, like, what were your expectations? How did you prepare yourself for that physically, mentally, spiritually? And, did it, I don't want to say did it meet your expectations, or like was it kind of what you thought it was going to be like?
Man, I think, specifically this Thomas Rhett tour, right? I've dreamed my whole life to kind of, have the tour bus be on tour. I've bought a ticket to every Thomas Rhett show that he ever did headlining,
Yeah.
So then to be on that tour, and man, me and Thomas's friendship is a whole different story of just the Lord's faithfulness in my life that, we can get into later. And then he's such an amazing dude, but he's really taken me under his wing and just been like a big brother. And, he called me about 1.5 years ago and just said, man, he said, quote, word for word, he said, man, this year, my biggest thing was I wanted to get better and more intentional at listening to the voice of the Lord. And I just really feel like he's telling me to mentor you. And so he called me, told me that. And that led to him inviting me on tour, and led to him and I building this friendship. He signed me to a publishing deal and all this stuff. Well, stepping into this tour, man, it's like, that's a big deal. And I'm still a 21-year-old kid, at the time. And, had this dude that's just believed in me. And so it was such a dream, and it was so amazing in a lot of ways. But man, to be honest with you, it was one of the hardest and most challenging seasons of my life. Mentally, physically, because it's such a learning curve. Mm-hmm. And, I take a lot of pride in, living the right way and doing the right things. And so for me, stepping in this tour, I felt like the Lord had been so faithful to me in the way that he orchestrated my whole story and bringing me onto this Thomas Rhett tour. And it was so obvious that it was him. So my response had to be of gratitude. And it's one thing to praise the Lord with your words, but man, to praise him through your actions and to surrender, with true faithfulness back. And so that was for me, is like, man, I stepped in this tour, and I just, like, some simple things that I did were just like, staying disciplined in the word every day. And I didn't drink at all the entire tour. Just chose to be really disciplined in how I led, for one, in just my relationship with the Lord, but also as a leader, stepping into like such a challenging role as a leader, where I'm now leading a band, leading a company, leading, 8 people on the road, where you're kind of the guest on this tour. And there were a lot of bumps in the road, man. Like there were some really challenging seasons and weekends and days that I was tested. And there were a lot of times I just cried to the Lord. I said, I wasn't ready for this. You know, like, why did you bring me to this when I wasn't ready? You know, about probably 2 or 3 weeks into the tour, my first single on radio gets like pulled and like, you know, ends up failing on radio. And I felt like I let everybody down. And then, you know, some things happened among my band where we had to fire people, and I had to get, you know, brand new guys in there. And it was a lot of challenging things. But at the end of the day, it was like, Lord, I know you put me here, and what you've, you know, there's a verse in Isaiah that says, you know, what the Lord is bringing to birth, like, will not die, essentially. Yeah. And so I really felt like, hey, he's brought us this far. He's not going to turn back now.
Yeah.
And so either way, it was this season more than anything has just been a test of my faith with the Lord. You know, specifically just the Thomas Rhett tour. I think there's other seasons of the touring that has tested other parts of me. But specifically that tour, it was a really challenging season, and one where I felt like the Lord was just saying, hey, you're going to have faith with me and going to have to grow in that, because I brought you here and I'm not going to turn back now, but I'm also going to, you know, because I'd say at the same time as I'm saying all this, I've grown more in the last 6 months than I ever have in my life. For sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Would you say that you were a disciplined person before you started this tour?
You know, some aspects, yes, some aspects, no. And it's something I'm still, you know, growing in. But I've definitely, I've been hot and cold in my walk with the Lord a lot, where, you know, I'll have 3 months where he's all I think about, and then 3 months where I don't open my Bible. Yeah. And I think it's a really challenging thing for a lot of people. You know, you kind of get this high of the Lord and you want to grow in your faith and, you know, read your Bible and you're praying and your prayer life is better than ever. And, you know, the only thing on your heart is the Lord. And then, you know, next thing you know, you're not even thinking about him, and you kind of slip back into your old ways. And so I've done that a lot, but I think this year was really the year that things started to click for me, that, you know, my relationship with the Lord wasn't necessarily, it wasn't about doing these things, but it was about what it meant to truly abide in the Lord and to walk with him. Mm-hmm. And I think in different atmospheres and different seasons, those things, you know, kind of shift on what that looks like. Yeah.
What would you say to the person who's listening, whose job or profession really requires them to be in a worldly setting, and, you know, they're struggling with that? You know, there's temptation from the world. Obviously, we're all in the world, but we're not of the world. But if your hobbies or your professions or what you do for a living, you know, really kind of forces you and pushes you to be in those settings constantly, what would you say to the person who's just kind of walking that out and maybe struggling with that, and who's just kind of just in that and feels like they can't, you know, turn down those temptations that keep coming?
Yeah, I think for one, I think, you know, one thing for me is that when you ask for the will of the Lord, he'll bring it. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, like, when you ask for the will of the Lord, like, he'll give you that, but it's never going to look like you want it to.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be in the timing. You know, when you ask for the will, you ask for his timing, and it's often a lot different than ours. And so, you know, if the will of the Lord on your life has brought you into a place where you feel stretched and tested, and like the pressures of the world and of temptation are kind of overwhelming you, I think start with the fact that, okay, the Lord brought you there, so that means he trusts you there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big part, because if the Lord trusts you, then you have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. And I also think that anywhere, you know, we were talking about it earlier, it's like the darker the room, the brighter the light can be.
Yeah.
So it takes, at the same time, it takes 2 times more discipline to have the light. Mm-hmm. And so you just kind of have to make a decision on not only how you want to live, but who you want to be, and the level of temptation, the level of pressure on you. The more the pressure, the greater, you know, your response, and the greater the impact you can have. You know, it's like I have, as hard as it is a lot of times to, you know, live the way that I feel called to live, and I fail a lot. You know, I'm not perfect at all.
For sure.
But I also understand that I'll have people that'll listen to what I have to say about the Lord, more just because I write country songs, or just because I was on the stage that night, or just because I got to go on that tour.
Yeah.
And so either way, I think just like, for one, trust yourself. For two, make the decision on who you want to be, and allow that decision to affect things. Because if you're going to make that decision, you have to live in a way that can, breed that outcome.
Yeah.
And then I think third, like, take pride in the fact that you now have an ability that a lot of people don't have, to witness to people that wouldn't listen before.
This podcast is sponsored by Faithful Counseling. 2020, I really think, threw a curveball for a lot of us, and for me specifically. I was in college. I graduated college in the height of COVID, and I didn't get a full, proper graduation, and life just really felt crazy in that time. And something that really helped me was just having a counselor that I could talk to and really just navigate all those things that we were going through as a world, as a nation, as a country, and just kind of trying to make sense of all the stuff that we were going through. And thankfully, I had somebody to talk to. And, we still need someone to talk to. It's 2022, and we still need just as much help now as we did then. And if you are someone who you don't have someone to talk to, then I want to recommend Faithful Counseling. And Faithful Counseling is not a crisis line. It's not a self-help organization, but they're a group of Christian therapists who can help you with anything that you're going through and do it securely online. So for me personally, when I go through things, I like to just talk it out. I'm not someone who likes to internalize things and just kind of keep it to myself. I really do best when I have someone that I can just talk through, and that they can listen to me and not judge me for the things that I'm saying, but that they just want to be there for me and they want to hear the things that I'm going through. And that's been my experience with therapy and with counseling, is somebody that I can trust and somebody that I can just tell all my stuff to, and they can listen to me with no judgment and help provide any insight. And with Faithful Counseling, you can send a message to your counselor. You can log into your account at any time. And plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions with your counselor. And it's more affordable than in-person counseling. And we all need someone to talk to, and Faithful Counseling can be the ones to help. But don't just take my word for it. You can visit their website and read real testimonials from people. Faithful Counseling user ME says, "Helen has been wonderful to work with and is exactly what I needed." So visit faithfulcounseling.com/Huff and get the professional faith-based counseling that you deserve. They've even got a special offer for 48 Men podcast listeners. Right now, you can get 10% off your first month at faithfulcounseling.com/Huff. Thanks again to Faithful Counseling for sponsoring this episode. And because too, if you think about, the settings that you're constantly in, there's a specific, and we talked about this earlier, there's a specific anointing and there's a specific call that someone has in their life to go in those settings. So how do you feel like God's prepared you to be in those settings? And because, obviously scripture says that you won't be tempted beyond what you can bear, but we're still dudes. We still struggle with, X, Y, and Z. So how do you feel like, and maybe it's the discipline that you talked about in the morning of reading and not drinking on tour, but how do you feel like, in any way that God's prepared you to be in these settings day in and day out, and to where you don't fall under the expectations of people, you don't fall into the lustful traps or the drinking traps, or just the I want to be cool traps, or whatever it might be? How do you feel like God's prepared you to be in those settings and not cave under that pressure?
Yeah. I think, like I said, it's like there are a lot of times that, the Lord would give me a blessing that I wasn't ready to handle. And I wasn't in a season with him that I deserved it, but he knew by the time that I would be, where that promise was leading, that he would have my heart where he wants it, which is incredibly gracious of the Lord.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I think it's something I battle with daily. And over the last year and a half, I feel like, this time last year, man, I was in a different place.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's just about, okay, there's a level of impact I'm now able to have on the people around me, and just what do I want to be known as? Because I could be known like every other person, and use, there's a verse, what is it? I think Hebrews 11, or maybe 8, but it says he did not he did not. It was talking about Moses, and he says he did not give in or choose the pleasures of fleeting sin, but instead to like the glory of the Lord. And for me, it's like, okay, understanding that, and I have a power that I didn't have before, just because I sang a song that people like. I sold tickets to a show and I sang on a stage. That's the only reason. Take that away, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing different. But understanding that, it's like, okay, what are you going to use that power for? Yeah. It's like, for me, man, I want to use that power to influence people, influence young men and people that look up to me, and just be a light in an environment where there's a lot of just pain and hurt. And it's like, man, these people are coming to these shows so that they can escape something. And if all they can see is just a dude who loves the Lord, even in just the way that I perform, even just the way I speak, even the way I interact with the people around me, it's like, man, that'll last way longer than if I'm just getting up there trying to get everybody drunk.
Yeah, for sure.
I just say, like, in the Lord preparing me, I think He's been really gracious.
Yeah,
honestly, man, the Lord's prepared me, because everything that's happened, He made sure I knew I didn't do it. So at every moment of this journey, any success I've ever had, I genuinely can't claim that I provided that success. And so with that, it's like, all right, Lord, you're kind of in control, and I have to continue to give that back to you.
Yeah. And even just what you do, there's such like a humility to it and like a dependency, because, on the flip side, you could get to a point where, it almost becomes like numb to the point of like, I'm not going to struggle with something while I'm on stage, and you kind of just like become prideful about it. And then that's when you end up, caving into something, and that's when you end up falling under the temptation to where you kind of lose the dependency that you used to have. And now you've kind of been like, well, I'm not going to mess up, or I'm not going to struggle, or I'm not going to fall into this. Then you kind of lose that dependency. Then that's when you end up, falling. And that's when you end up, messing up or whatever. But it's in those moments of like dependency where you really, you feel the Lord near. And that's what's cool about that, because I do think, like, even as believers, like, we can be so just cautious, and I think it's a good thing at sometimes, but I think we can be so like, just distancing ourselves from worldly settings. But then it's like, like you said earlier, if we're called to be the light, of the world, then we have to go into these dark settings. And who's doing that? Like there's this idea of, and it's this really good quote, but it said that sometimes the church becomes keepers of the aquarium instead of fishers of men. And it's this idea of like, if you just stay in your bubble, if you stay with, your Christian friends, and if you stay just in this setting, then you lose touch of reality, and you lose sense of actually what people are going through. Yeah. And if you keep being fishers of men, so for you, singing country music at, college campuses and at bars and at worldly settings, like, you have been given a grace, and you've been given, an ability to go into these settings and help pull people out. So yes, people might come to listen to country music, but if you do it in a way where light is shown and the gospel is kind of preached, then, you have more of an impact on people than just being in our little church culture Christian settings. And I think that sometimes we can lose sight of like championing people who go into these settings just because we can't do it ourselves. So I just applaud you, because I know it's difficult. I mean, if you're on a 40-something city tour and every night there's people drinking and girls that are drunk around you, like most dudes would struggle with that. But if there's a something in you that's a discipline of like, I sought the Lord's counsel this morning, I made this vow not to drink while I'm on tour, then I think God honors that, and He gives you, He gives you purity, whether it's in eyes or just your life, to not succumb to these things that most dudes who would be put in that setting would, kind of flippantly give into. But if you're truly pursuing Jesus and these other things are kind of pushed in your face, then it's easy for you to turn those away and follow along the path that He's kind of created for you.
Yeah, and I think there's a beautiful balance of it. It's like, I think the church can oftentimes go too far and like, let's stay, in our little community and never look out the window. And then there's also people that think they're strong enough to not have Christian friends and not have community and not go to church, but follow the Lord. It's like, man, you kind of have, there's a beautiful balance of those two things.
For sure.
And, yeah, man, I think it's at the end of the day, I'm still a young dude trying to figure out, who I am daily in the Lord. And, it is hard. Like it's hard to, be on these, in these college bars and, where all these people are like, I always say when you're on a stage, man, like, especially as an artist, people are holding their hands up for me to touch them, and then as I touch them, they scream, and they lose their mind. And like, that's what they did to Jesus. Yeah. So it's like, I'm putting myself in a position to be worshiped every night. And it's like, no human is designed to be worshiped at all. Yeah. So that's the first thing I have to recognize, is that I'm putting myself in a world that the human psyche and mind is not, not designed to handle. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, well, from there, what do I do? And it's like, okay, I have to make the decision that at some point every night, I'm going to choose to lay down the glory and to shake off the glory and give it to the Lord. So it's those little things like that. It's also understanding that as I speak these things out, as I do a podcast like this, there's more accountability for me. You know what I mean? People are going to listen to this and then look to my actions and say, "Oh, is he really living what he's saying?" Yeah. And I think there's a beauty in that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, as I'm, I to walk into these bars, to walk into these shows, to walk into these rooms and these atmospheres and not have people around me in my circle with me in those rooms that are, choosing to follow the same, make the same decisions and follow the Lord in the way I am. Like, it's impossible. So it's about having your community and the people around you in those environments as well. I think it's a really big thing.
Yeah. Well, one, I want to encourage you, then I want to ask you a follow-up to it. I mean, I don't know of any 21 or 22-year-olds that are saying, the things that you're saying with that idea of, just the glory aspect, because, it's true. I mean, before me and Sadie met, I wasn't famous. Now I have a following because of Sadie. And there are those moments of temptation where, like, you go to places and, someone recognizes you, then you have that dopamine hit of, like, somebody recognizes you, and it's like, how do you not get caught up in that glory? Because it is difficult. We're humans. Like, we fall short every day, and there's repentance that's required of that. But I mean, honestly, dude, just hearing you say that, I was just so encouraged, because that's just I've never really thought about that idea like that, of people touch Jesus and scream, and equating that to you being on stage and people doing that. So I think that's such just discernment and wisdom. And even just at your age, that's really remarkable. And has that been something that you've struggled with? I mean, because I feel like obviously it's natural to, like, obviously in hindsight, it's easy to say, like, I don't want the glory, but like in those moments, you get caught up in it and it's tough. So have you had a difficult time walking that out?
Yeah, for sure. It's a daily battle. It's like, I think as men especially, like, we love being praised. We love being respected. We love being thought that we are, great at something. And for me, that's, writing songs and playing on a stage. And so to have people and girls, that are looking at you in a different way just because you held a microphone for an hour, that's a drug to your system, like, that's just the reality of it. And so, understanding that is a big thing, and acknowledging that. Yeah. But at the same time, like I said, understanding that there's a power there. Yeah. And so what are you going to use that power for? You can use that power to get the girl that you think is attractive, or get the drug, or drink that night, or have everybody worship you, or whatever it is. It's like, or you can use that power to, like, give it to the Lord, and then lay down your pride, and then understand that you now have the ability to have these conversations and build connections with people, and to be in those environments where, don't know, man, where you can just shift people's lives, man. I see it so many times, these broken people or people in these atmospheres that are looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, I've seen it all. And I know enough to know that the only thing that's going to ever give you peace and joy is the Lord.
Yeah.
It's like if you think that getting a hotter girl or that next drink or a better party is going to fill you up, it's not. You know, I think about it all the time. It's like, man, how many times we feel like we're missing out on something? Because I had the enemy use that lie to me all the time. You know, where I would get really close to the Lord and then I would feel him use the lie of, hey, you're missing out when you're not going out to that party. You're missing out when you're not going out to the bar. You're missing out on a Saturday night when you're not, you know, chasing girls. And it's like, no, man, I'm missing out when I'm not living in the will of the Lord, when I'm not living in the peace of the Lord, when I'm not living in the joy of the Lord. Because at the end of the day, man, I couldn't tell you 3 stories of crazy nights I've had. I could tell you 50 stories of incredible things the Lord's done in my life. It's like, that is what counts, and that's what matters, and that's what we remember, man. And when we have a wife, and we have a family, when we have kids, you know, we have grandkids, it's those stories that we get to pass down. It's like, you know, scripture says, let generations tell of the stories of what I've done. It's like, man, I could tell you so many stories of what the Lord's done for me, you know, already in my life. And so it's just, for me, that was a big breakthrough for me when I realized the lie that I'm missing out. The truth of that lie is that I'm missing out when I'm not living fully in the Lord. Yeah.
How many people do you see pursuing the same thing you're doing kind of have that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically, I've been so fortunate because I've got to watch up close and personal who I am positive is the absolute best at it, which is Thomas Rhett.
Yeah.
And getting to watch him, the way he handles his family, his marriage, and just his relationship with the Lord and his pursuit of the Lord inside of, you know, a crazy world has changed my life more than anything. And having him just, you know, pour into me the way he has. So, you know, there are a lot of people. I know another one is Walker Hayes. That dude has one of the coolest testimonies I've ever heard. And just the way the Lord has poured favor because of his commitment to the Lord is crazy. But man, TR specifically, Thomas Rhett, that's a dude who's after the heart of the Lord. And man, he's just carried an honesty with me. And I remember him telling me this early on, you know, before I really ever started, because I was asking these questions. I said, dude, how do I do it? How do I walk into these bars and not get caught up in the lust and the temptation and the, you know, and the drinking and the girls and the party and the, you know, the desires of, you know, of the flesh. And he just said, man, it's as crazy as you want it to be. And I think that's for everything in life. It's as crazy as we want it to be, man. You get to make a decision. It's like, if you want all that, you can have it. But if you want to have a family and, you know, build a healthy, you know, pure relationship and, you know, be the friend you want to be and the son you want to be and the, you know, husband one day I want to be, it's like, you get to make that decision too.
Yeah, that's so good. Man, that's so good. Well, I know that tour life is crazy. You know, being disciplined, in the morning spiritually and some of the other things. And also, you know, do you like sleeping on the tour bunks?
I love it, man. I actually
it's the best sleep.
You kind of once you like get used to it, you're like, man, I don't want to sleep anywhere else. Getting in that cave.
But for me, man, like when we go on tour and stuff, like I have such a hard time, you know, working out just because we sleep in so late. 'Cause you have no idea what time it is. You go to bed late.
It's the
so
hardest
for you,
part.
I mean, are there any like, you know, tour life workouts that have been your go-to that you've been doing?
You know, that's the hardest part for me about everything is the lack of rhythm in my world.
Yeah,
because we're living on the road, like, you know, when you're out there touring, you know, it's like there's no rhythm. You go to sleep at a different time. You wake up at a different time. You're in a different city. You know, maybe there's a gym, maybe there's not. You don't know what breakfast is going to be like, and so that's the hardest part for me about everything is lack of rhythm. But I try to be mindful with it and you know, understanding. I'm a big believer in like, you know, the three, you know, to exercise the 3 parts of your body, your soul, and your spirit every day. And it's like to have the most productive day. And so try to get some sort of workout in. One thing that helped me was my guitar player was a certified CrossFit trainer.
That's
so
awesome.
he was always pushing us to go a little harder on the road. But once again, it's one of those things that I'll get into it. I'll be grinding for 2 months and then lose a month because I lost that rhythm. But yeah, I think just being diligent, like anything else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, man, I really just want to champion you with just with what you're doing. I think, like we talked about earlier, I think as believers, seeing Christians in settings that are worldly, I think we can be quick to judge people. I mean, when Sadie went on Dancing with the Stars, she got more backlash from the Christians than from the worldly people, just from people that do life, whatever. And I think that we do that, man. I think that we can just be quick to pick up stones, or we can be quick to judge people and all these other things. And I'm just calling us to not be like that. We need people to go into these settings and to actually make a difference, to go be a light in the darkness. So just to encourage you, man, you're doing a great job.
Thanks, man.
Hearing you talk about not wanting the glory and not drinking on tour, trying to be just a good man. You want to pursue purity in your dating relationship and working towards marriage. I think that we need more men like that who don't want the glory, who try to resist the temptations of lust and drinking and all these other things. And like you said, like what Thomas Rhett told you, like it's as crazy as you want it to be. And I think that really is for everything in life. We all have different temptations. We all have different things we go through, and something that is a temptation for me might not be a temptation for you. And if for me going into a bar is going to lead to me getting hammered and lusting after girls if I'm in a relationship, then it's probably not the best setting for me to go to. So I think we all have to just be diligent with what with what God's given us, and the grace He's given us, but also the temptations to just to deny those temptations. So just to encourage you, man. I mean, I really applaud that. I think that's very difficult to be in the setting you're in, and I don't think that you could do it in your own strength. I think it definitely requires the Spirit, because at some point you just would get to, you couldn't just keep doing it in your own strength. So just keep relying on the Spirit. I think, and for those listening, champion believers who are in worldly settings. Don't bash them. Encourage them, and just tell them they're doing a good job, because it's not easy. I mean,
well, I think it's funny. Like we oftentimes Christian will bash people in public settings on platforms.
Yeah,
it's like, no, man, ministry. We think that ministry is just working at a church or speaking at a Christian conference or writing worship music. It's like, no, ministry is wherever you are. Yeah. Ministry is who you are. Ministry is, the way you serve the Lord. And it's whether you're a teacher or a doctor or a country music singer. It's like, man, that's your ministry.
Yeah.
So show to people what Jesus' love looked like.
Yeah. Whatever your hobbies are, whatever you're passionate about, that's your ministry. For Peter, it was fishing. For you, it's country music. For me, it's fitness. I mean, for others, like you said, it's a doctor, it's a teacher, it's a, an athlete, or whatever it is, whatever space you're in, pursue Jesus, tell others about him, and go make a difference.
Yeah, man, I think for me too, it's like pursue peace.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like for you? Pursue peace, because peace will tell you when you're living with the Lord, peace will tell you everything.
Yeah.
And so making a decision that costs your peace is not a decision that is worth it. And so that's one thing that I just had to train myself, is like, yeah, there's some things that I have to deny myself of daily to live the way that I want to live and to live inside of the peace. But at the end of the day, it's the long walk in the same direction. It's one step at a time. And one day you'll look up. I try to make decisions for the person I am at 60. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like I try to make the decisions for my kids and for my wife, and for the legacy that I'm going to leave behind. Because I think if we do that now, and if you choose that now at 21 or at 22 or at 18 or at 30, whatever age you're at, if you choose now to live in the way to make a legacy. I think you'll be really grateful when those seeds that you've sown reap the fruit.
For real. Well, we're all called to crucify, those passions and those desires, and to pick up our cross. So you're doing a good job of that, man. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Really excited for people to listen to it and tune in.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate you giving me a platform that I can, talk about the Lord and things that matter.
Of course. Well, we'll rejoin this in a couple of years when you're on every billboard in the country.
We'll just do it next month. Come on now.
Let's just do it. Come on now.